This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Tech, show number 127, recorded on July 25th, 2013. Here at Home Tech, we cover all your favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home, news, reviews, and product updates, and conversation, all for the Average Tech Guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in Bellevue, Nebraska. A little stormy tonight. We might have some thunderstorms roll through, but that's okay. UPSs will cover everything. And we post this show with all the show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. If you have questions, comments, or contributions, just send me an email. You can send that to podcast@theaverageguy.tv. I get more of those emails, so I appreciate you guys doing that. You can find me on Twitter, just at Jay Collison, or follow the show schedule on Twitter. And actually, for tonight, I realized I just forgot to post out there, but that is the Average Guy TV. There's way too many steps, actually, to start a podcast, so I'm sorry about that. You can also join us for live chat during the show over at theaverageguy.tv/live. If you're on the live stream page, actually, it's right to the right of the video, and you can join us over there. That actually has both high bandwidth and low bandwidth capabilities, so you can now join us on your phone. Just if you have to have an ample connection, but it is streaming a low bandwidth version that I'd like you to try out for me if you could. If you get an opportunity on a Thursday night, 8 o'clock Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, check out the AverageGuy.tv/live on your browser, on your phone, Windows, iPhone, or Android. See if you can watch us. No chat available that way, but it'd be interesting to see if you can stream this via your phone. Write down the connection speed and some of those other things so I know what you're doing, but I'd love to be able to know if this thing is working out via a low bandwidth option. We also have a high bandwidth if you want it on YouTube. You can get it that way as well, and if you just look in the upper right-hand corner, both the links are up there. And we'd love to get you watching any way you can. All right, well, we're on part 2 of a 3-part series. Hopefully, if you go out to theaverageguy.tv/HT for Home Tech, HT126, a show we did last week around hard drives, I wanted to talk about it again, and you would think there just isn't that much to talk about around hard drives, and there actually is. The hard drive is still alive and well. Lots to talk about around those, and so we're going to talk about what we use and some of the tools that we use and where we buy them and problems that we're having with them. I've got 2 great guys that have been on the show a bunch of times before, and so we'll get an opportunity to talk about hard drives as well as your questions from chat. So if you've got some things you want to add into the show, head over to theaverageguy.tv/live. Join us in chat. And we'd love to have you there. If you are listening to the recorded version, first of all, thanks. I do appreciate you guys coming out and doing that. We've had some really good numbers as of late. There's I get somewhere between 500 and 750 downloads each week. Not afraid to share those numbers. I know some podcasters are, but I appreciate you for listening. You taking the time each week. Many of you have been around for a while. You came over with me from the Home Server Show, and I appreciate you being out and listening to it each and every week. It's a privilege to be able to talk to you each week, to be in your car, to be on your workout, to however you consume the podcast. It's a privilege for us to be able to do that, and so we say thanks. All right, let's introduce the guests here, or the hosts, real quick here, and bring them in. Guys we've had before, so we won't spend too much time on it, but all the way to the right, and actually both of you guys are up in the frozen north. Nathaniel Lindley, how are you doing?
I'm doing real well tonight. It's pretty warm and comfortable this week, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, we had a cold front come through as well and brought it from the high 90s with 90% humidity down into the 80s, high 80s, which is always really nice. So nice to have some cooler weather. And then in between us in a sandwich is Kevin Schoonover. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Really glad to be here.
Good to have you out. Good to have both of you. And let's dive right in as we talk about some hard drives. Hopefully you got a chance to listen to last week's show again, theaverageguy.tv/HT126. Is that? If you didn't, that's fine as well. If you're listening to this, you can always go back and listen to it later if you want to. But we're talking hard drives. And so last week we spent some time going around the horn talking about what we had. Of course, Andrew and Christian were with us, and they talked about their stuff. Andrew has the night off. Christian does as well. I'm with you guys. Kevin, let's start with you. And why don't you give us a breakdown just of what you currently are using kind of in your hard drive inventory? What kind of, last week the guys seems like they had a good mix of SSD and spinners. And so talk a little bit about what you have in your environment.
Sure. So laptops, I've pretty well migrated everything over to SSDs. Last one was, and you guys mentioned this last week. It seems like as I migrate to bigger, better SSDs in some of my bigger systems, I take the old, smaller SSDs and move them to some of the less used laptops or less used devices. I had an old DM3 HP 13-inch laptop. And a little 160 gig SSD kind of breathed a lot of life into that, really made it snap again. From a workstation, so in the house here, I tend to have several laptops, 3 of them going these days. I have a all-in-one HP 23-inch all-in-one in the kitchen. That actually has a 60 gig SSD in it, not a lot of data on it, and once again, makes it real snappy. In the workstation that I'm doing the podcast from tonight, it's kind of my main work area. And in these, and we'll detail this probably a little bit more through the conversation, on workstations, I'm a 3-drive kind of guy. So I put an SSD in them. I put in a Velociraptor as a caching drive, and then I put in a large drive, generally a 5400 RPM drive. So the box I'm working on today has a 256 gig SSD from SK Hynix, and then I have a 450.
SK Hynix. I've never heard of that before.
So Hynix is so the Koreans, Samsung, Gold Star, and Hyundai. Hyundai sold off their semiconductor group and they named it Hynix. So SK and so kind of my favorite SSD drives all tend to be from folks that manufacture their own flash memory. So Samsung, Toshiba, SK Hynix, and then Micron, Intel, Crucial, that consortium. Just oddly, probably not odd, but a coincidence, the guys that actually make the flash chips tend to have the best drives. But so for my main system, that's OS and boot all on the 256 SSD. Just a habit I've got into over the years was, and I always seem to have some 10K Velociraptors laying around.
You got some crazy stuff laying around, my friend.
And I think it was mentioned last week's show. PC Doc over at Build Your Own Box has a great tutorial on moving all your temp files and all your temp stuff off your SSD to limit your amount of rewriting on the drive. And that's what I use that Velociraptor for. I go through and follow PC Doc's list of finding all your temp files, temp directories, temp folders, putting those over onto the Velociraptor with the page file. And I also, when I'm working on projects or things like Photoshop, the folders that I'm working out of, I park those on that VR drive as well. And then I've got a 3 terabyte Western Digital RE enterprise drive as my main storage in this box. So that's any workstations I do for friends or folks that are doing, say, AutoCAD or video editing, those types of things. I tend to stick with that 3-drive system. It's worked for me. VR drives are cheap enough that it really doesn't add a lot of expense to it, and I think it keeps a lot of wear off from SSDs. And my servers downstairs, I've got the IOSafe NAS that has a pair of Western Digital 3 terabyte Reds in it, NAS drives. My Windows Server 2011 box has a pair of 300 gig Samsung 10,000 RPM SAS drives mirrored for the boot drive, and then for the storage in there, I've got 4 2 terabyte Constellation drives from Samsung. So I went with all SAS drives in that box, mainly because I've got the HP 410 RAID controller in there, and at running SAS drives, it all runs at SAS 6 gig speed. So, and last but not least, I still have an old version 1 home server running, and that has a variety of 1 terabyte drives lurking in there. And that's probably my
okay. So that's kind of
biggest stuff.
That's your landscape.
Yep.
All right, Nathaniel, what's your landscape kind of look like?
Well, it's not quite as complicated. I just wonder, do you see a huge benefit from breaking up all those pieces, 3 separate drives in one box, rating this and mirroring that? I mean, do you really notice that performance increase or reliability? I mean, I understand a RAID where you want the redundancy, but
In the server, the reasons for RAID in the server, and that's a good point we should discuss, is I mirror my boot drive on the server because I travel a lot for work. And if it died while I was gone, I want to make sure there's a failover in the server so things keep going.
so it buys you time.
It buys me time.
Yeah.
John Stussman and I were talking about that over on home server. His point was, hey, on my home server, I prefer to have a single drive because if it dies, I plan to put in a new one and I want to rebuild the OS and clean it all up. And that's a great strategy too, as long as you're around to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
The RAID 5 on my home server is more a function of I just wanted one big volume. I was looking for a bigger volume. And I didn't really do it for performance reasons, but there is some performance benefits there as well.
So, but when you said you're using the Velociraptor or the 10,000 for sort of a caching disk,
Yep.
instead of putting the wear on the SSD, did you do that right away, or did you have problems that encouraged you to do that? Did you have problems with SSDs and said, I really need a caching disk in between the OS and the storage?
No, actually, that's a great question. I've been doing that since before SSDs existed. It's been a force of habit thing.
Oh, okay.
Probably dating back to Windows NT 3.1. I've done some type of moving. It used to be best practice to move your page file to a separate spindle.
Right.
And so I've always been kind of a 3-spindle kind of house. OS on one spindle, paging and temp stuff on a second spindle, and then data on a third spindle.
It just sounds like a lot of work and complexity, and I like that, but then I also have to support it and fix it and do all those things, so it kind of discourages me for something like that. What I've done is I've switched over most systems to SSDs for boot and OS, like a lot of us, and I've been really happy with the OCZ line of SSDs. I've gotten those usually at Micro Center because they'll have discounts or things. I had one that was DOA, just took it back, swapped it. It's no big deal, but I haven't had any problems with dying hard drives. I've heard of people where the SSD dies completely and they can't get anything. The motherboard won't see it, things like that. I've never encountered that myself. But it's desktop, laptop. So I think I've run 4 or 5 SSDs in different systems, but just single OS drives. And they've all been clean installs, so I haven't really tweaked anything in Windows to maximize for an SSD because I've just seen that it shuts off defragmentation, and I assume it takes care of everything else. But I suppose if you could start putting that page file somewhere else, that might help. Most of my systems stay on all the time, so I don't know if it's a stress having the page file on the SSD or not.
Theoretically, it is, but I've threatened to just invest in a SSD that I'm going to destroy, and set a timer on it, and just write to it and erase it, and write to it and erase it until it finally pukes.
Well, I did read an article about that with one of the early MacBook Airs that had the built-in SSD chips. It wasn't even a 2.5 drive, and I think it was Macworld or PC World that tried to put extra wear and tear on it, and simulated writes and reading and nonstop access and all that would simulate a long-term use. And they said after doing all this heavy effort on it, it still booted just as fast, performed just as fast. I mean, it didn't fail, so they didn't see any performance degradation after that time of use on that test. But that's with the chips that are built into the board.
Mm-hmm.
So with the moving to PCI-based SSDs, which theoretically get rid of the bottleneck of SATA, are they going to be more reliable, or are they going to be less reliable? I mean, the performance will be better.
The performance will be better. The interesting thing, so When I first got out of college, I was in the semiconductor end of this world when Flash was first being created. And it's kind of an odd thing right now is if you look at the Flash memory used in the original SSD drives that came out, those chips are better than the chips we have today. Those chips are, and it's not reading. Flash you can pretty much read from forever. It's when you erase a cell and then write it. So it's write erase cycles versus reading. If you just load up a flash drive and you're just reading from it, you're really not going to have any issues with it. It's the number of times you write and erase, and the wear leveling in the controller chips has really done a great job of cutting back on that. And keeping in mind, they treat the media much like a hard drive, just like a hard drive. When it finds bad sectors or bad spots on the drive, it maps those out. Controller acts the same way on an SSD. So we went from drives are made out of NAND technology flash, and they went from we got SLC single level to multi-level. Multi-level, you get 2 bits per cell. Now you'll see TLC drives triple layer, so you're going to get 3 bits per cell. And my understanding is our write tolerance is going to drop by at least tenfold. So technically, the flash that we're going to start seeing in SSDs is getting less reliable as opposed to more reliable. So life expectancy, once again, getting back to that, I talk about this stuff all the time. I've yet to see an SSD wear out. In my day job of selling storage arrays, still the majority of SSDs in those boxes are single layer, which really has very good write capabilities. But we're starting to see those folks go to multi-layer as well, just with the idea that the community has a mindset that disk drives wear out in 5 years. So if SSDs wear out in the same time frame, that's an enterprise kind of a world. But earlier you mentioned that I've only had one SSD fail, and it was ran for 2 weeks and just died, and that's what tends to happen with SSDs. So the enterprise data I've been able to gather on SSDs shows that they're really no more reliable than a regular hard drive. So I was caution folks. I think there's a bit of a mindset that there's no moving parts in here, so it's more reliable. And of course, we always drive home the got to back it up and make sure you have 3 copies of your data.
Kevin, is it any less reliable though? I mean, is it, or do we just kind of treat them exactly the same? That we're going to get 3 to 5 years out of a drive, and beyond that, it's going to be questionable.
Yep, I don't think they're any less reliable in our applications. If you threw it in a big server that kind of goes wild with lots of writing and erasing kind of functions. But that kind of falls into the hard drive question as well. I know over on home server we've talked several times about green Western Digitals versus red Western Digitals. Reds are technically designed for NAS. Greens are designed for desktop. That's not to say that greens won't work well in a server for you, but it's kind of that discussion of, so my Windows Home server is a backup server. Yeah, those drives are spinning all the time. It's running 24/7. But I'm really only backing up data to it once in a while throughout the day, which is a lot different than if I had a NAS at an office where people are pulling files on and off it all day long. You're reading, writing all day. Heads are flying around in there. You got a lot of activity going on. In those kind of applications, absolutely, I'd jump up to a red. And much like SSDs, I think we're going to start to see things break out. And we're already starting to see a lot of things break out where if you look at performance, this Hynix drive I have is a high-performance drive, and the reading and writing cycles are pretty much identical to them. Now we're starting to see some of like the Samsung 840s where we've got 500 plus megabyte reads, but only 250 on the writes. And is that bad for a OS drive and a server? No, that's probably fine, because you're really wanting to see that read performance, not so much the write performance. So it kind of depends on what you're doing with the drive itself.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think maybe you treat SSDs the same way we have been treating spindle hard drives for years. You find the drive that is appropriate for the application you're doing.
Yeah.
So, in my experience, I've seen a lot of drives come and go, and I've had bad experiences with the Western Digital Greens. The reason is I've been putting them into Drobos or other arrays where they're reading and writing small data all day long, 24/7, and that taxes them more than if they just sat in a desktop and you stored your movies and just were idle most of the time.
Yep.
And I've also tried using them as a recorded TV drive in my HDPC. Same thing. That fast, tons of data writing to it, running 24/7 has killed those greens. So I was using the wrong kind of drive for my application. Now they're sitting in a pile because I don't need them anymore. I've replaced them over time with Hitachi's 3 terabyte drive. My favorite drive is always the Western Digital Caviar Black drives. Those have just been great in any application. And then I've started to put the WD Reds in my Drobo. So I have 3 of those in my Drobo and a single 2 terabyte black because it's the better drive for what it's doing.
Right.
And so if we transfer that to SSDs, there's a array of SSDs that you can get in price, and like you said, single layer is the most reliable long term, but it's also the most expensive, really, really expensive.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
then the nice sweet spot is the 2-layer, dual layer cycle or flash drives, and those are priced well. I'm a little bit hesitant if people start buying up the triple layer drives that are real cheap because I can get more storage and it's cheaper. But if it's going to prove to be unreliable for people, it's going to be bad for their use case, especially if they're not backing up. So it's the same thing. Someone asked in chat about what kind of drive to recommend for a laptop. Laptops are perfect for SSDs. Form factor's right. They're lighter. They use less battery. They're not prone to physical vibration and dropping. So that's where I've used them, and then I've found they work great in desktops too. So I always said I've had good luck with the OCZs, and I've bought some Samsung's 840s. Those are like incredibly light. There's nothing inside them.
Yeah, it does feel like they're empty, right? You're like, hey, where's stuff going to get stored?
Yeah, what happened to my 3-pound 2 terabyte drive that I had?
Right.
So it's the same thing, and you just whatever kind of drive you have, back it up.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I just got a note from Andrew. He is officially not going to make it, so Andrew will miss you. But Andrew joined us last week and kind of gave us his configuration. Nathaniel, anything else from what you're using that you wanted to cover? Did you get to everything? I'll cover since I didn't cover it last week, I'll cover what I use this week.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I mostly stick with OCZ SSDs right now, although the Samsungs are real promising. I've been using those at work without any issue. And then I'm a real big Western Digital fan, so.
Okay.
I've had Samsung drives. I had a nice 250 gig Samsung that was just a desktop drive in a desktop, and it lasted a long time. But then when it started to go, it was really bad. The performance dropped, and it was dropping sectors, and I was like, okay, time to retire.
Yeah, you kind of.
But
know.
otherwise,
you get that feeling. You're like, the drive's going.
In terms of RMA stuff, both Seagate, Hitachi. I think it's Seagate and Western Digital are the best for easy returns.
Yeah.
And my advice to people is if you have a problem with a drive and you can run a smart tool on it and get some sort of data, fill out their RMA, and when they ask you if you want to prepay for shipping and print a label, do it. It is so much easier and cheaper. They give you it for cheaper than if you went and did it yourself at the UPS store.
Yeah, you can't do it for the price that they give you. I think it's $5, $5 or $6, and they just take care of it for you, and they put a little hold on your credit card.
Yeah,
and
just
send you stuff. And
save the boxes that they came in, and just pack them back up, ship them. A couple weeks later, you get a new one. I just love it.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. I think all the hard drive companies, for the most part, have gotten their act together around RMA. And have made that process super easy. So certainly don't be afraid of that if your drive goes bad, like Nathaniel said. Yeah, go onto their site, run a check, send it in. It's super simple. So, well.
And then they try to upsell you too. So they're like, oh, wouldn't you like to upgrade to this drive? And,
yeah.
All right.
No, I haven't had that happen. I haven't had it where they've tried to upsell me. Now I have an RMA to drive in forever. I'm gonna kind of go counter to what you're saying. Most of the time, Nathaniel, I agree with you, and I still do. But but I'm a little different. I'm actually a Mushkin guy. So if you
Yeah.
if you haven't looked at those, Rich O'Neill turned me on to those. And by the way, Jim Barton in chat, he had mentioned about should he be putting an SSD in his laptop, and we said it again last week. We'll say it again this week. No better upgrade for a laptop. Maybe RAM up if you're short a little RAM, that helps. But man, an SSD will absolutely be night and day difference on a laptop. So if you're the family tech guy, if everybody's coming to you with their problems, and it works, one of you guys mentioned it earlier, it's a great desktop upgrade too. And
Yeah.
so if somebody's having a slow PC and it's an older PC, even if it's a SATA 2, go buy a cheaper SATA 2 SSD. Those are super cheap right now, right? Don't buy the best one. Go out and buy a SATA 2 SSD. They're trying to get rid of them, and so those prices are down a little bit. And even a SATA 2 will improve the speed of both desktop and laptop significantly. And my recommendation is always, I think, Nathaniel, you mentioned this, always reinstall the OS when you're putting a new SSD in. I would not try and back it up, take their old crap. It's a great time
Yeah.
to fix the sins of the past. So back up their stuff, reload it, and then don't let them put any of that crap back on, basically, that they had before. You will see a significant speed improvement. So that's for the average tech guy, it's a great lesson. I think we'd all agree with that. So Mushkin drives, I've used 6 or 7 of them over time. I've installed them in our church and haven't had any callbacks on those. Recommended them friends. Like I said earlier, Rich O'Neill kind of turned me on to those. They are made or manufactured here in the United States. So if you're here in the U.S., that's kind of if you're trying to buy U.S., that's a good thing here. And so I have bought the 60 and the 120 gig variety of those, and I've got in my current, we call it a studio PC, the one I'm using right now, that's got a 120 gig drive in it, and I did, Nathaniel, all the things that Mike Fauché recommends or I think, Kevin, you mentioned that, BYOB, they've got a post out there of all the things that they recommend you do when you install an SSD, and we'll try and grab that. Kevin, maybe you can find that link for me and throw that in the show notes so we've got it.
It's in the show notes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So go look at the show notes. Great article. It's a must-read if you're installing an SSD for the first time, because there are a few things that you should do to make the performance even a little bit better. So, Kevin, I don't quite go as far as you. I don't do anything with the caching bit, but I do always install a spinner of some kind in there, because most of the PCs are recording the TV. They're using Media Center to record the TV. So I always give them a spinner drive to run that stuff off, but to put the recorded TV on. And I actually, on the broadcast server, so the one you're actually watching the podcast on right now, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to it, it's recording. You're in the recording from it. But that I actually write the video files to the SSD in real time as that's going. And there's a lot of temp files that are created, and there's a lot of writing that goes on. But we're doing video, and I really want the optimum performance out of what I'm trying to do with video and audio. So I don't write that over to just a single spinner. Now, I could set up a RAID and do 0 and I could get faster speeds out of spinning drives if I wanted to. But in this case, I've decided to push that SSD to its performance max, so to speak, and I am reading and writing to it a lot. And it's been in there a while. I haven't had any problems yet. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. That may have been a bad decision down the line, but that's the one I've made.
Well, if it's working now and you're wearing the drive, then you just plan on knowing that you may have to replace it.
Yeah.
At worst case.
Yeah, and it's a Core i3 box that I bought. I think it's a Fujitsu Core i, the made by Fujitsu Core i3. It's got 8 gig of RAM in it, and I'm gonna run it till it's dust, and then when it's done, I get another broadcast server, and so I've been saving. I've got money in the budget for that. I've been saving up. So yeah, I'm Nathaniel. I just plan to run it hard, and then when it's done, strip whatever parts are good in it out, and go on to something different. So that's the plan there. Actually, Kevin turned me on to the HP Touch, the HP 310 Media Smart. That's not what they call it. Smart Touch. Touch Smart. Thank you. That the wife actually uses upstairs. That's her main PC now. And you know what? I chose not to put an SSD in that. She's still running a spinner. So at some point, when it's time to upgrade again, maybe when that spinner drive goes bad, you can hear it spinning. I will probably replace that one upstairs with an SSD, and she'll get great performance, and we'll extend it. The kids have all gone with SSD drives in their gaming PCs, and then they have some form of data RAID as well that they're running the games off of. And The difference, so I have two Drobos. Of course, I would have two. I have an FS and a 5N, and I'm running greens in them, and mostly because that's what I have, and I have not had any problems with the greens in the Drobo. So,
But what are you using the Drobos for?
well, not the intense activity. You're gonna catch me on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's why
So,
it works. That's
yeah.
why it's good for you.
Yeah, I do save. I kind of when I'm moving media, all the ISOs are stored out there. So anytime I download an ISO from Microsoft, it gets stored out there. Any kind of temporary files that I'm working with that I know I'm going to delete later, I just throw out there. So you're right. The caveat is it doesn't get a lot of traffic on there. But so far I'm probably the average guy when it comes to the storage that I do in the Drobo. The greens have done okay for me. So if you're not going to have a lot of activity on those, I've had pretty good luck with them. I think if you're going to spend a lot of data out to them, you might want to think about those reds. So
yeah.
We'll just say that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tools that we use. If you guys want to dig in a little bit. So, last week we mentioned some of the smart stuff. Nathaniel, do you have any specific software tools and such that you use when you're fixing? Go ahead.
Yeah, I get lots of those. My hard drive died, and my wedding photos are on there, and I have nothing. And so I get those stories where it doesn't boot, doesn't see it, and or it's just really slow and not working. So my favorite tool is the SpinRite tool, which is I found to be really valuable and useful for verifying the integrity of the drive if it's questionable, and if it's gone, it'll do a lot to try to get it back. I did have one iMac come to me, an old white shell case one that wouldn't boot or do anything. And this was so old that the monitor didn't work, so they had an external monitor hooked up to the iMac that they were using.
Nice.
And of course, it's not backed up, and I was able to take it out, and it wouldn't show up in the BIOS. I did the 6-inch drop and just jarred it enough, and then it showed up long enough that I could SpinRite it, and then I kept it spinning and got it mounted, I think by using Gparted Magic on the Ultimate Boot CD to get the data off, and it was slow, but I got it all off. And of course after that, I shut it down, tried to boot it up again, and wouldn't show up. So I got that tiny window of opportunity to get this stuff off. So those are the tools I use. The other one I used to use a lot is Disk Warrior for the Macintosh. I believe it's by Allsoft, and that does a really great job of hard drives. It's mainly a directory repair tool for Mac, but it does a good job if the drive is failing, because it'll say, hey, this looks like this drive is failing. Do you want to try to copy your data off? And it'll let you slowly copy data off the Mac. So that's the other product that I like a lot. To use.
You had mentioned the 6-inch drop, and that's one of my favorite and famous methods. And people go, really? And it's literally just, if we pretend this Lumia 900 is a hard drive, it's just literally holding it up 6 inches off the desk and dropping it. Try and get it flat as you can, and that'll often unjar the spindle. And you're right, just long enough. I mean, you better be ready.
Yeah.
I've also heard people talk about putting it in a freezer and some of those other tricks to get those working. Kevin, any tools that you're using beyond but what Nathaniel mentioned?
Sure. A lot of the same stuff. I would caveat that the drop is your last resort.
Yes.
Literally,
it will be your the last thing you can do to the drive.
And I have had success with the and I haven't done this for years, but it's where the drive is obviously spinning okay. And taking the circuit board off a good drive and putting it on your bad drive and getting things back that way. That worked for a while back in the old days. I haven't tried that for a long time now. Most of my utilities don't have as much to do with the actual fixing the drive itself, but I always seem to point people towards things like Glary utilities. And if you haven't picked, Glary is free. Version 3 is a great product now. Goes through and finds a lot of issues with your Windows installation that may look like they're actually hard drive issues that creep up. Plus, there's a great duplicate file finder in Glary, so you can go out and clean up your hard drive,
Really?
get a lot of the duplicate data off it. I use Crystal Drive Info to go through and make sure the drive is working okay. Big fan of Belarc Advisor, more, not so much from a hard drive point of view, but it tells you everything that's on your hard drive. So if the hard drive dies, you've got all your license keys, you've got all your installs, you know exactly what the inventory of the drive is. Jim's a big fan of Belarc.
Yeah, I worked with those guys years ago. You're the guy who keeps bringing them back up. I forget about him, but I worked with those guys. This would have been 2000, like 2000, 2001. So they've been around a while, and they have a really great product. Actually, they still use Crystal Reports to generate the inventory report, and they keep adding little things to it. And so, Belarc's a pretty good deal. So it's a good one to use, and I think it's still free. Did you throw the link? What was the tool that you mentioned? Glary?
Glary Utilities. I can throw the link in.
Yeah, throw the link in the show notes for folks as well. Yeah, you bet.
And then a SpinRite, very common product I use. And then last but not least is Knoppix, which is just a bootable CD of Linux. And I find there are several things where if sectors start dying on a hard drive and Windows decides it doesn't like it, many times a Linux installation will still mount that partition and give you just enough time to get data off it. There's a very common issue I run into, especially with Vista-based drives. If you have Vista on the drive, you just come in one day and it won't boot, and Windows just doesn't want to see it anymore. I've had great luck with Linux and specifically Knoppix. Just pop the Knoppix CD in, boot the system up, copy off all your data, reformat the drive, reinstall Vista, and you're up and running again.
So Kevin, is that you're running then the Linux installation or the Linux kernel off of the DVD or CD or whatever, right? I assume you could do that with a USB.
Yeah, you can put it on USB
drive as well. A good recovery concept, anyways, right? Throw that thing in, boot to it. Have you? So when you say move that data off, so I've got a PC on my network. It installs that version of Linux. I assume it finds drivers for network cards and those kinds of things so that I can get to my various network components, and then I just find whatever source I can get to, and I just start copying volumes of. Do you try and copy it all at once, or do you try and move kind of files over in little bits, or what's been your method?
I think in many cases you could find your network stuff. I usually keep a USB drive, hard drive handy, just to spin it off quick. And frankly, if I'm helping somebody do this and we get in and get going, I've already asked them priority. What files do you want first? Let's go. We have no idea how much time we've got, so
the ticking time bomb.
Let's spin this stuff off as fast as we possibly can.
Okay.
Definitely want to prioritize because I try to use a USB drive or something local to copy and not over the network, and you prioritize like, okay, whose pictures are most important, and you do small chunks, because if you start taking all of the data and it fails part way, you don't know where you left off.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you can't really run any of those sync. You really can't really run those sync applications where it kind of verifies what you moved and what you haven't moved, and it'll come back, right? You're kind of, it's file copy, right?
I suppose you could run rsync if you wanted to, but for me, I'm booting to gparted, and
right.
I don't know if there's a file synchronization tool, but that would be a good way to verify what you copied was correct.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always recommend, in moving data around, especially large amounts of data. Now, Windows 8 has gotten better at this, but before Windows 8 came out, I'd always say if you're going to move large amounts of data, use one of those tools like SyncToy, or there's a bazillion of them that on the Windows side that do this. Run one of those just to make sure, because you're right. Sometimes you don't know if all the data has come across, right? You have no way to check it.
Yeah, I've been a big fan using Terracopy on Windows. Especially going across network volumes, because I can tell it in the settings, always verify my copy. So it'll do a check on each file to make sure it copied correctly.
Yeah, other Jim in chat had said, we were talking about, just going back to Belarc for a second. He said Belarc was my question about free, not free for business. So it's free for individual use, not free for the enterprise. So that is true. Yeah, most are that way. You can't use it inside the enterprise, or they are going to ask you to license it inside the enterprise. When I used Belarc last, we used it as a complete inventory. I worked for Commercial Federal Bank, which is no more, but they got bought by Bank of the West. We had 60 branches in 9 states, and all of them had PCs all over the place. And so we set up a centralized, inventory server back here in Omaha, and then I had everybody install clients around the network. We didn't have a great way. Think about it, this was 1999, 2000. We did not have a great way, and Microsoft did not have great deployment products at that point. So I physically went around to different locations and then talked folks through installing that software. And then it would report back the information for me into the server, and I could pull reports at the enterprise level. Very cool. Not terribly expensive either. I think they were, at the time, they were very reasonable. So those guys at Belarc have been around a while. Nathaniel, let's see. We were at tools. Where did I leave off?
I think both of us hit all our tools.
Okay, good. So you're done on tools and keeping those. Yeah. Oh, we were talking about sync. We were talking about sync applications. So yeah, some good. If you have any tips on those, or maybe the way you do it, and you head out to theaverageguy.tv/ht. This will be 127. Drop into the comments below. Love to hear kind of some of the stuff that you are using to get that done. Okay, let's talk about where we buy them. Now, last week we had an international contingency with us. Rennie was hanging out. Andrew was with us. They talked about where they buy them in Australia. We're all U.S. tonight, but Kevin, I know you turned me on to GoHardDrive.com, and that's an inexpensive place to go out and get white label drives. And that's really good. I was, looked at some prices out there, especially I've got a 6-year-old server up here, and that's still SATA 2. No need for me to buy SATA 3 spinners, because if I'm going to put them in the server box, I just don't need to pay for it. And I was able to at least look at some. I'm going to buy my data RAID. We're going to put a RAID in there with some larger data rates. $65 for those drives. SATA 2, 300 to 500 gigabyte. Great deals out at Go Hard Drive, and I need to get an affiliate link out there. I don't have one yet. But Kevin, other places that you go when you're shopping for drives, and even include the local places if you got them.
Sure. So we do have a Micro Center here in town, and I do find they're pretty competitive, and it's nice to be able to walk over there and take them right home with you. So I do buy stuff there. Newegg is probably my best spot when I'm buying new stuff. End up over there quite a bit. And then actually I end up buying a lot of drives on eBay, and I know as I say that, I also cringe because if I've ever bought drives from you on eBay, you've also received my note about how to actually package and ship hard drives. I have a picture someplace of a large box with a drive just bouncing around inside of it, and the person just, that it gets back to how we handle hard drives, and they're very delicate pieces of equipment, and they don't get shipped well. The thing I find I buy up on eBay a lot is actually the enterprise class drives. If you know you're looking for Savo drives from Seagate, or Constellation drives from Seagate, or RE-based drives from Western Digital, if that's what you want, you can tend to find them new as overstocks from some of the white box server guys. So like Hypermicro out of Chicago tends to be a place where you can get a pretty good deal through eBay on enterprise class drives. And I tend to stick with new on those. What I do buy used off eBay, back to the Velociraptor thing, I just picked up 5 160 gig Velociraptors. They're SATA 2, okay size caches. They're the nice ones with the heat sinks on them, and I got them for about $15 a piece. So
wow,
they're in the spin rate process right now, making sure there you go.
Look just like this.
Absolutely.
In case you're wondering.
and as people have heard on many other calls, those work out great for put three of them in a RAID 0 set and host your VM environment on them.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. You sent me these. You'd sent me 4, and this was the bad one. It just sits on my desk. I don't know. I always have it here. I've shown it in about 800 different podcasts. But these are 150s, and I've put 3 of them together in a RAID 0. And somebody called me out last night. I forget who it was. Might even be one of the guys out there in chat tonight, and said, I don't get I don't get why you guys all of a sudden have got into this RAID 0 with these, these 10,000 RPM drives when a single SSD today, price-wise, it's cheaper actually to go with a single SSD, and you get pretty similar speed from them, right? It's fairly comparable. I know there's differences. It's fairly comparable. So, Kevin, what do you say to that? 3 drives, RAID 0 versus 1 SSD. In some cases, the single SSD would be cheaper.
I think I'd have to kind of do the math. I think I've always kind of defaulted to it because it was cheaper than an SSD, and I'd have to kind of hit the math. But I think I was buying 150 gig Velociraptors for $49 a piece. So, 3 of them would be $150, and that would get me a 450 gig RAID 0 that would be about the same performance as an SSD. So I actually was kind of in the cheap camp because it was much like the workstation you're working with. You've got a nice LSI RAID controller built right into the box. If to the person's point, if I was starting from scratch, I would not go out and buy a RAID controller and some Velociraptors to come up with this RAID 0 thing to host VMs. That would be better. Money would be better spent there by doing it with an SSD. But if I've already got a RAID controller capable of RAID 0, and I can pop these drives together and get some pretty outrageous throughputs, and I guess the other factor is I think a single SSD, we're back to that wear load kind of thing. So, I could go either way.
Okay. No, that's good. I just, and don't take me wrong, I didn't really get blasted. We just had a conversation around it. We, in an informal way. It was fine. I love the challenge. I think it's going to be different for everybody in every situation. You mentioned I got that nice LSI controller on there, and in this case, the drives were free. Right? Thank you, Kevin. And so, yeah, it was way cheaper for me than to do that. And I would say, if you can do a lot of thrashing on that OS drive, you might want to consider a RAID 0 instead of an SSD.
Yeah, but look at it this way, okay? So if you're building a machine, if you've got to buy a RAID card and 3 drives just for running your OS or your Scratch, and then you got to add storage to it, you're increasing the complexity and the cost and the power consumption, right? So if I was going to build it from scratch, I'd rather put in a small, lightweight, not using a lot of power SSD and get pretty good to the same performance, maybe not the longevity, and I've just reduced the footprint of that machine, that desktop.
Yeah, no, right on. I couldn't agree with you more from that standpoint. I think that gets into there's no perfect way. It's the way that you've engineered it based on your situation that is the right way.
Now, that being said, I'm really curious about getting some of these white label Velociraptors and trying them out.
They are pretty cool, and I had never seen speeds like that. When I rated those 3 together, never seen speeds like that. If you're brand new to the show, I talked about this a ways back, so I admitted that I've become kind of a RAID fan, and I wasn't before. I mean, before I did this experiment, I'm kind of like, RAID complexity, just like you'd mentioned. Wasn't too hot on RAID. But after I've done this experiment and I tried it out and I saw what kind of, I used ATTO to get some read and write speeds, I'm like, holy crap, this is fast. So it was kind of fun, right? And the price was right. So want to step back just a second. Nathaniel, I saw you out in chat. 2 more tools that we were talking about that just kind of showed up. So Dart is one of them, and I've never used that before. So other Jim brings that up out there if you got to TechNet or just Google Dart, D-A-R-T. That stands for the Diagnostic and Repair Toolkit from Microsoft. So that's also available for download from them. And then I had a question on Terracopy. Isn't Terracopy embedded in Windows? Don't you go to the command line and type in Terracopy, or am I getting that wrong?
I think you're thinking of Robocopy.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Right?
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yep.
The copy in Windows 8 is kind of nice, so I'm more using Terracopy from the Windows XP and Windows 7 days.
Okay, so those are 2 additional, well, not 2, that's 1. Robocopy, which I forgot about, and I think you just go to the command line and type in Robocopy, right?
Yeah.
And it comes up, and then Terracopy is a installed application that you'd use to sync those files across. So, Nathaniel, where do you buy from? Oh, did we finish with you, Kevin? I'm sorry.
Yep,
Did we finish with you, Kevin? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nathaniel, where do you buy?
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this again and get some more Kevin's tips on the eBay finds for enterprise drives.
Yeah, it was good. That's worth listening to.
Yeah, he went real fast and I can't keep up. But in the Go Hard Drive site is pretty cool too. So yeah. I like that. I'm pretty vanilla. I mean, I get them at Amazon or Newegg or Micro Center up here. And just kind of watch for deals. One of the things I like to do is the site camelegg.com will do price tracking on any item at Newegg or Amazon, and you can set alerts for it. So kind of like stocks, you can say, well, when the Western Digital Red 3 terabyte gets down below 150, send me an email, and it watches Newegg's prices and lets you know.
Like Tech Bargains? Doesn't techbargains.com do something very similar?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably.
Oh, yeah,
I haven't used that one.
Yeah, if you check that one out, that's another one where you can set alerts. In fact, I set an alert for the 3770K, the Intel 3770K Core i7, and it, I think that at $399 or something. And I said, well, tell me when it's under $200. And just once, have I gotten that alert? It was, or maybe it was $250, something like that. So.
Well, and I was really concerned when we had the flooding and all the hard drive prices spiked. And I was like, oh, I should have bought more before. And so I wasn't going to pay, $300 for these drives now. So I was waiting, and I said, well, if they get back down to the normal prices of $150, then I'll pick up a couple more. And so I use it. It has pretty graphs too. So I don't know about Tech Bargains, but this graph is really
I'll have
nice.
to check that out. No, I think they're similar sites in the sense that they set an alerts and monitor. Tech Bargains kind of covers all the different sites, including like HP and some of those sites that are Dell, and when they have deals, they kind of kick out price alerts on that. And they also have, it's also worth going over there just to kind of every day they just load it full of deals, and it's not a bad way. Kevin, speaking of deals, you're kind of the HomeServerShow.com deal guy now. You seem to be coming up with the best deals. What are you using to find all these deals? How are you getting that done?
I just have a regular grouping of sites. So I'm a bit of a night owl, as you can probably tell by my posting habits, unfortunately. I'll bring it up here so I can see all of them. I tend to find most of my stuff. So CNET's website, there's a guy called the Cheapskate. He posts every morning. And he has some pretty good deals. Sometimes I feel like I swoop him because I post the night before. Woot is one of my main spots yet. I find a lot of good deals out on Woot. The website, I get some decent deals out of a website called One Sale a Day. And I can put all these in show notes for you guys too.
That'd be great.
Daily Steals, I find good deals up there. Daily Steals has a site called Ice Monkey that's their closeout site. And Lalo is got some decent deals on it. So I've just got a variety of these websites that I kind of hit on a regular basis.
Yeah.
The other one, before I forget, we talked about Newegg and Go Hard Drive. Don't forget to do web searches on eBay for both those guys, because Newegg, Buy.com, and Go Hard Drives, when they have small quantities of things, they tend to blow them out on Newegg as opposed to on their own website. So like I think yesterday or 2 days ago, SSDs have been kind of high priced lately because there's been a shortage of flash, but there was a 240 gig SanDisk, real good performance on it for $149. So I know a lot of, I posted that one up, and a lot of guys snapped that one up kind of quickly as well. So that's kind of my round of deals. And
okay. Good enough. Well, if folks want to get, if you're listening to this, if you're not a regular listener at HomeServerShow.com, and Kevin's over there in the forums over there. If you don't want to join the forums, we kind of have our own site. If you go to Facebook.com/TheAverageGuyTV, I think it is, or just go to TheAverageGuy.tv/Facebook. That's the easiest way to get there. Join that group, and Kevin is kind enough to post out those deals out to the group as well, and you can just get them as they go. By the time they disappear, they've already expired at that point, and so it's if you're a big Facebook guy, that's a great way to do it. You post them anywhere else, or those are the two main the two main places we see them from you.
Your Facebook page, and then Surface Geeks and Home Server are my main spots.
Are the spots, yeah. Well, we appreciate that. You have elevated to God status in chat right now, as they want to pay you a commission for some of the things that you find, and some of those things. So no, really helpful. And if you've got deals as well for us, you can also put them out there on that Facebook page. We'd love to have you. It's just a great forum community that we have. I've said this before, but I am super impressed with the community we have built around Surface Geeks, Home Server Show, and The Average Guy. You guys are just really kind and helpful to one another. We rarely have to deal with trolls for the most part, and it's just a sweet place to be. And so if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten involved in the community yet, let me ask you to get involved. It would be great to have you there. We'd love to have you come out and be a part of the conversation. The more the merrier, and some great conversations. And shoot, yesterday my wife and my son posted in the Facebook group on the same day. I was a proud dad and a proud husband at that point. I'm like, yes, I got my family posted on my Nerd Geek site. Yes.
I am relevant.
Exactly. Anytime you can get your family involved, that is good as well. And then we've got some great contributors out there posting stuff. Tim Black regularly posts, John Stutzman. I just saw a post come through from Jim Barton. He's been looking at different cloud storage options, and of course that's a big. Got the cloud storage guide. If you go out to theaverageguy.tv/cloud storage, I'm continually looking at those, and because they always seem to be upping the ante out there in the cloud, and various options as well. Okay, let's see, guys. Kevin, I'll throw it over to you. Anything that we didn't cover in that big mess that you wanted to talk about?
Well, one of the underlying things, and we've talked about like performance differences, and like the Velociraptor drives, and I think one of the things as disk drives move ahead, whenever we talk about drives, there's areas that I don't think a lot of guys spend a lot of time on, and it's terms like areal density and transfer rates, and how you actually look at the specs of a drive. And I think the whole SATA 1, 2, and 3 thing is kind of deceiving, because if you look at SATA 3 is 600 megabyte transfer rate. Well, even the fastest SSDs are about 550, so you really don't push that. Now, if we look at a hard drive, why does it have that interface on it? Well, if the drive has a 32 or a 64 megabyte cache, and if the data you're looking for, or your operating system is looking for, is in that cache, yeah, it's going to transfer from the drive to your system at full SATA 3 speed. But that's 32 or 64 meg of information, and it's gone. So the real number I think you want to look for, and it's hard to find, drive guys don't always like to print it out, is referred to as sustained transfer rate, or it could be, I like Seagate's using a new term called media to buffer transfer rate, and that's from the platters themselves to the cache chip on the drive. And as drives get bigger, you get more capacity. Areal density is this idea of how many bits or how many bytes can you get per square inch per platter. The heads have to get higher performance to be able to read and write those rates. The read channels have to be able to pull that data. I think I threw in the show notes something about HAMR. And Seagate has touted that by 2016 they'll have a 60 terabyte 3.5-inch drive. Well, to get to these high density hard drives, HAMR is heat assisted magnetoresistive head. They're actually going to mount a laser on the head that'll heat up the platter of the drive so that they can write much higher densities. So the technology is just kind of on the verge of craziness here. The two links I put in the show notes were I thought was kind of an interesting analogy. One of them is some benchmarking I did on a brand new Western Digital 1 terabyte drive, and the transfer rate on that drive, sustained transfer rate, is about 200 meg. But if you notice in my benchmark, the spec rate below that is random seek, which random data reads, and that still holds at about 150. And that's one of the things about the 10,000 RPM drives. When the platters are spinning that much faster than a 7,200 RPM drive, your random transfer rates remain pretty good, because every time you come around, you can pick up the data faster than a 7,200. Now, a day or two after that, John Stutzman put up a post on a Seagate ST3000DM001, very popular 7200 RPM drive. And what caught my eye about that one was it was, one second.
Yeah. Just a moment while Kevin takes a call.
Kiss goodnight. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. No.
Very
good. Yeah, that's a family show.
At first I thought John had done something wrong because his numbers looked too good, but I went and checked out the data sheet, and surprisingly, these 3 terabyte, 3.5 inch Seagates have a sustained transfer rate of about 200, so very similar to the VRs. Now, if you move down, though, once we hit that random seek kind of function, the VR blows it away because it's a 10,000 RPM drive. The platters are spinning that much faster. But today I probably expect to see out of a good 3.5 inch 7,200 RPM drive sustained transfer somewhere in the 150 to 175 kind of range. Earlier, when you mentioned that that great boost in a laptop you get by going to a solid state drive. Somebody asked me about that one time hey, I had a 5,400 RPM drive in my laptop. I went to an SSD. Oh my God, this huge improvement in performance. I had a 5,400 or a 7,200 RPM drive in my desktop. I went to an SSD, better performance, but not quite as much of a noticeable hop. And the big difference is it's that data rate, it's that transfer rate, whether random or sustained. Those little drives that come in laptops, they just have awful, very small areal density, very old, kind of older technology. They're not there for performance. They're there for low speed. So it's one of those things that in looking at random versus sequential. Or sustained, if you put them in a RAID, say a RAID 5, you want to see sustained because you're streaming data. You're probably, I'm assuming you're streaming data. The 10,000 RPM Velociraptors, this random seek capability is a lot of the reason why WD calls them a workstation drive, because you're hitting lots of different functions with them. And I think that's part of the reason of using those in a RAID 0 that people like as well, because if you're running RAID 0 and you're running VMs on top of it, you're doing a lot of random seeking because you're bouncing all over the place with VMs. So long-winded spiel, but 10,000 RPM drives are great for random seek, random transfer rate. And as time marches on, I think that the number I've seen with the HAMR drives is we should be seeing like terabyte transfer rates. So, the areal density is going to shoot up on these platters. We're going to have a lot more storage on the drive. The heads will need to be better to be able to read and write at those rates. The read channels will need to be able to handle that. And frankly, we'll have to move to the new specs around SATA enhanced, which is an 8 gig and a 16 gig specification to get higher bandwidth out of the drive. But today, the whole SATA 2 or 3 thing, an average SATA 3 hard drive doesn't put out enough data to saturate a SATA 2 drive port or a controller port.
Kevin, you talked about needing to do some math before this show, and so there's some math that doesn't match up for me with hard drives. So let me ask you this: so with all other computer stuff, we go 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 when we count speeds. Why with hard drives are we going 3, 6, 12? Why is that different? Do you know?
I don't. I'm not sure why they hopped onto that for a transfer rate, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I didn't know. If you know, send me an email, podcast@theaverageguy.tv. I'd love to know. It just seems odd that that on the hard drive transfer rates they've settled down that way. Nathaniel, anything that we missed from your sheet that you wanted to cover?
I have some questions, so I'm going to put those out, and we'll see if we can get them answered. One is I think down the road you talked about your cloud storage Know-It guide. One of the things I'm trying to do is look at a cloud storage tool that's very secure. And this is not hard drive related, but I'm kind of exploring it. I want to be able to store real sensitive documents in the cloud that I can get to anywhere, like a passport or tax forms or things like that, but I don't trust Dropbox or Box.com or things. So I'm kind of exploring Jungle Disk and other tools for that. But my question is, when you buy used drives, off of eBay, Kevin, how do you verify that they're going to be reliable when you get them? I mean, if they're shipped decently, do you do some tests on them ahead of time to say, yeah, this looks like it's not got too many power on hours, it's clean sectors, etc.?
Yeah, I use Crystal or trying to think who else. Acronis has another tool that I do to check the hours, check the time on them, and then I run SpinRite on them to clean them up. So first thing I do with any drive I get is to run SpinRite and get the kind of the SpinRite thumbs up approval there.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was expecting. Yeah, I was just wondering, is there something else that you do that would give you some sort of clue if it's good or not?
Sure.
The
I'll throw
Smart Report, is good, and I've used the one that comes out of the Gparted Magic. There's a good smart and quick test there. And
can you modify those records, those smart records at all that are on the drive? Can you get the equivalent of setting the odometer back to 0 on your car?
My understanding is you can't, and we've actually played around with like updating firmware on drives, and you can't even change the smart data by changing the firmware. It stays intact.
I bet Christian could.
I'm sure with enough time anybody could. Hey, Nathaniel, to your cloud question, it's not a perfect solution, but it's one that I've used. The PKware guys that make PKZip, they have a great product called SecureZip. So in addition to compression, it uses strong encryption. So you can use this to zip up and encrypt your files before you put them in the cloud. And then they have mobile apps for it. So from your Android phone, your iPhone, I don't think they have Windows Phone yet, but iPhone, iPad, and Android, they have apps that allow you to go up and grab that data, pull it down, and unencrypt it with your password.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. I'll have to look at that one. I mean, I know there's stuff out there. I just need to explore a little more, and it's that balance between convenience and security. And Dropbox is very convenient and easy to use, Copy.com and the others. But I just don't know about if it's the best place to be putting my driver license copy and credit card numbers and things like that.
I agree.
I had another question, but I can't seem to remember it. It'll probably come back to me.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Kevin, anything else?
I was just looking at my list here. One of the areas, when I'm helping friends out, an area that I think is that people forget about is, a friend of mine was backing up all of his data to USB hard drives, and his data protection plan was to store those in a gun safe. And we had to have the discussion about, hey, my gun safe is fireproof, and yes, it's fireproof to not let paper burn, which is 451 degrees. But once again, if you dig into those specs on hard drives, non-operating temperature range for a hard drive max is probably about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you know people who are storing drives in fire safes, it can be done. I mean, you can find these fire boxes that are rated to like 125 degrees, and I would feel fairly comfortable putting a drive in that and then putting it inside a bigger fire safe. But if you know people that are doing that, and frankly, I seem to run into quite a few people who've been sold on that idea.
Yeah.
Not a safe route.
Well,
what are the guys that make that fireproof external?
Usually you find them with Sentry and any of the guys that make regular safes.
No, it's a hard drive manufacturer.
Oh, IOSafe.
IOSafe, yeah.
Yeah, I
was just get that.
I have one.
Yeah, me too. I was just that's what I was gonna bring up, and they, those things close in on themselves and then protect that drive from the heat. No guarantee that you're going to get the data off if that thing goes into a burn, and I think it can survive for some ridiculous amount of time, 2 hours maybe in a fire. Even if your house burns down, it's probably not going to be that hot in that area for that long. Those kinds of things go pretty fast. Many of you, if you've been following me very long, my brother lives up in the Black Forest area, and we talked about this on the show, that that just burned, that area burned in Colorado, and the fire went right around his house. It was the craziest thing. It came right up to a street, it came east to a street, and then it went south, and then it went east again, and then it went north, right around his house. Just crazy how lucky he was. So appreciate those of you who had positive thoughts and prayers our way when we were talking about that. I was really worried about my brother's house burning down to the ground. In those fires, those houses, they don't they don't just burn. You think about a fire and the fire department comes out and part of the house is burnt or maybe the roof is damaged, right? Some water damage. Well, these fires, there's nothing left. I mean, they don't try. They just burn straight to the ground, and they burn quickly. And you got to have something. If you're gonna depend on on-site storage for that, you got to have something like an IOSafe that's going to protect that hard drive. And I have a 1 terabyte, and that covers me. Everything gets copied to that every single night. And if my house burned down, it should survive both the fire and the water that's going to take to put. It's actually the IOSafe. So it's right there. You can see it on. Let's see if I get my big head out of the way. There it is right there. And that sits there and backs up. It's a great way to protect your hard drive. And we've talked about IOSafe equipment for a long time. Do either of you guys know anybody else doing? Of any other companies that are selling fireproof, waterproof drives like they do? I've never heard of another one.
I stumbled onto some guy who I think resells IOSafe and then also does kind of their own bigger RAID. If I find it, I'll throw it in the notes.
Okay. Yeah. Their IOSafe's a good one, and their CEO Rob, who we've met several times, is just a super good guy. They're a company out of Auburn, California, and they're just really good at what they do, and they just continue to make really good products. And so wholeheartedly endorse and support those guys at IOSafe. Not cheap, it's about twice the price to get a drive from them, but certainly this has been running for the longest time. In fact, I didn't talk about this much, but I put Home Server Home Server Smart on my Windows Home Server 2011 box, and it recorded a temperature problem with the IOSafe. When I plugged it in, it was reading it. So I sent a note off to IOSafe and said, what would be the acceptable temperatures? I found conflicting information on your site. And their tech support was actually super helpful. We went back and forth with 3 or 4 emails as he not only gave me the manufacturer specs, he asked me for my serial number, knew exactly what kind of drive I had in there, and said, these are the manufacturer specs, these are our recommendations, the number that you're getting in there is just fine. So you don't have to worry about that. You can turn that alert off. So I thought that was really nice. Got great customer service from IOSafe as well. So highly recommended if you don't have one of those. That's IO, the letters IO, and then safe, and you can get them at iosafe.com. Gentlemen, anything else that you want to cover? Should we wrap this thing? We're coming up to the close here.
I'm good.
Okay, Nathaniel's good. Kevin, you good?
Covered everything I
awesome.
I
well, some great conversation on hard drives, and again, this is why I do this. We switched over to this new kind of themed format, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. It just gives us an opportunity as a community to kind of hone in and focus in on a conversation. We spent an hour and 15 minutes talking about this last week, and I'm not sure there was one thing we repeated from last week to this week. I'm sure there were a few in there, but for the most part, all new information. If you missed it, theaverageguy.tv/HT for Home Tech 126. You can get to any of the podcasts that way. Just put HT in the podcast number in front of it, 099 if you're in those numbers and below, or 126 is the last one that we did, and you can go back to it. And actually, I added a new search feature onto the site as well. So if you go to theaverageguy.tv this week, I put in a new search box, and it'll do drop-down suggestions now. So if you were going to say you were looking for IOSafe, go out to theaverageguy.tv, type in IOSafe, and everything that has IOSafe in it from a post perspective, it'll drop down just like you would expect it on a Google search, and that will be just local to to my site. So it's kind of a cool little search feature that hopefully makes it a little bit easier for you to find stuff out there at the site. If you're new to listening to podcasts, maybe you're coming on the site and you're watching it live, but you're wondering, Jim, how do I get these things automatically, to my phone or to my iPod? Well, if you're using a phone or you want to do it on the computer, Stitcher is a great way to do it. Stitcher.com, and if you head out there, you can subscribe to Home Tech out there. You can automatically stream it from just about any device, from just about anywhere, in your car, at the office, at home. It's all set up for you, and it's a great way to listen to the podcast. Just go out to Stitcher.com, search Home Tech. We say right here it's education for your ears. And just a reminder, also we do financial tech. I haven't said that in a while. We do, Andrew Hunt and I do a financial tech podcast on Tuesday nights. We don't really go live for the most part, but a little 15-minute market commentary if you're kind of a financial nerd. and you like to keep up on the markets, we do that. Andrew Hunt and I do that. It's 15 minutes. Why wouldn't you listen to it? Search Financial Tech. You can get it from the site as well. And then Rich and I have been trying to pick up the Rich's Random podcast as well. We did one a couple weeks ago on WordPress. So Jim Barton had told me right before the show that he had just started a WordPress site and is starting some blogging. And that's always exciting when someone starts a new blog. I love to see that. And if you don't want to start your own blog, but you want to write, of course, you got a spot on theaverageguy.tv as well. It's a good platform. Lots of things you can write on from a tech perspective, and we'd love to have you writing if you want to do that as well. We also, just in case you didn't know, we're on Spreaker and Podomatic and Audio Boo and iTunes and Xbox and all the places that podcasts are found. You can find us out there. If you're not doing it automatically, let me recommend you do it that way. You can also subscribe to the show on YouTube. Some easy links to do that, theaverageguy.tv/YouTube. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. You catch us on Facebook, theaverageguy.tv/Facebook. You can kind of see a trend here. If you want to go to Google, guess what that's going to be? Theaverageguy.tv/Google. We'll get you there. And then don't forget to use theaverageguy.tv/Amazon. And I appreciate it. I said this in the beginning of the show, and if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. You're a really engaged listener if you made it all the way to the end. We should give like a prize for people who make it all the way to the end, shouldn't we?
Some sort of secret code.
I know. You have to listen all the way to the end of the show to do that. But I appreciate you guys listening. And I appreciate you. Many of you have used our Amazon link, and of course we turn that. Just real quick, let me just say this. If you made it to the end of the show, my most engaged listeners are here at this point. So let me say this. I was going to turn that money back around into giveaways, and we just have found giveaways aren't all that effective from a numbers perspective. It really doesn't change the needle. We don't see any huge spikes in that. A lot of you guys are buying the stuff anyways. And so we're actually, I may change that into the sense that we're going to turn that money back into infrastructure changes, things that will make the show better from that standpoint. From time to time, I'll pick up some licenses and stuff to give away, but that whole giveaway concept just never really worked for the most part, and I was a little. We tried it. We tried to be like everybody else, and it just didn't work very well. It just didn't see much. So if you have a differing opinion or you got some ideas on stuff, or let me say this: if you want to review a product for us and it's fairly inexpensive and you're willing to write a couple articles on it, send me an email, podcast@theaverageguy.tv, and if we can fit it into the budget, we'll buy that for you and send it to you. You can keep it when we're done. You can write a couple articles for theaverageguy.tv. So if that's been getting in the way of you writing, let me know, and maybe we can send some products out your way that you can review, and then when you're done, you can keep it, send me. Of course, can't buy a $800 servers, okay? That kind of money just isn't there. But simple devices, that new things that are coming out, and I guess there's a new Chrome. What's that new thing from Google? Chromecast, yeah, pretty interesting. Is there a price point on that?
$35.
It's cheap. See, that would be a perfect thing that I could buy for you on Amazon, have it shipped to you, and we'll
5 weeks shipping.
Is it 5 weeks away?
Yeah, it's 5 weeks back order now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that price range, something between $35 and maybe $100, and if you'd be willing to test it out and write about it and get some good articles out on theaverageguy.tv. Let's say we're creating a scholarship fund for you to be able to purchase some of those products. So let's try that out. If you have some great ideas, just send me a note, podcast@theaverageguy.tv. And I'd love to be able to do that for you. Who knows? Maybe you're an aspiring writer and you just needed a kick in the pants to get it done. We'll be back here next Thursday night. John Zadler, John Stutzman, the two Johns, John Squared, will be here. We'll talk a little Windows Home Server, and then we'll also talk hard drives. And so another great show ahead next Thursday. That'll wrap up this segment on hard drives. I'll take suggestions on the next series. Going forward, we're almost, guys, school is starting here pretty quick. So isn't that hard to believe? Nathaniel, when do you guys go back to school? I'm sorry I had to ask
We're post Labor Day, so we're busy getting everything ready for teachers coming back in August. That's always a big rush. But
yeah, now you're not a teacher, so you don't get the summer break that everybody else
I don't know.
does.
Summer's our busy time.
Setting stuff. For those that don't know, Nathaniel works for a school district up there, and so does a lot of things. If you go back, and I forget the one, but if you search Chromebook, we were talking about that earlier. That Chromebook episode did really, really well from a numbers perspective, and generated just a ton of discussion around using Chromebooks and such, and that whole laptop series went really, really well. So I appreciate your input on that, Nathaniel.
Yeah, we just got 350 more delivered today, so we got to get those enrolled and put them in a cart, and that's it.
Very nice. Well, good stuff. Well, we'll be back next Thursday at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern with the whole new crew. And I want to thank you for coming out tonight. And if you're listening live, stay around for the post show. You have no idea what happens in the post show. And I almost never, unless there's a good blooper, I never stick that post show stuff in the recorded show. So you want to be around here live Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.